Welcome to Salt of the Earth Farm Stories, where the heart of farming comes alive. Each week, host Darren Grigg will dive into the rich tapestry of farm life, sharing tales of hard work, laughter, and the incredible people who bring our food to the table. So grab your boots as we celebrate the stories that connect us to the land and each other.
In today's episode, we're talking with Trevor Crawford about the 67 drought, horse-drawn implements, and the vital role of legumes in enriching soil with nitrogen. He shares his journey of continuous learning through experimental plots, focusing on healthier, less chemical-dependent farming. He is passionate about tackling the issue of unhealthy food production, prioritising quality over quantity. It's all about nourishing the soil, fighting pests naturally, and re-establishing a balanced connection between the land and those who care for it. Today, we're about 2.5 hours north of Adelaide near Jamestown. So let's dive into this awesome approach to farming. Good afternoon, Trevor.
Good afternoon. How you going?
I'm really good, mate. Can you tell me where you were born, Trevor?
Here in Jamestown.
Roughly what year are we talking?
56.
Okay. And what are we up to then? What number's that?
68.
Right. Looking good for 68, mate.
Oh, thanks.
So did your parents purchase this land?
My grandparents. My grandpa and his brother were both over on the west coast, and they got sick of reaping gum nuts over there, and they came over to north of here, up at Mananeri. So that's where they started.
They bought a small parcel of land up there?
Yep, yeah. But this was the first block. My grandpa, he had terrible rheumatics, and he parted from his brother because he didn't think he was pulling his weight with his brother. So he come down here and bought this block because that was in 1920 when Old Kanowie got split up again, and the people on this block wanted fresh country to farm, and they went on to new pastoral lease, which was the breakup of Old Kanowie. Which was fresh land for them. And
right.
So my grandpa bought this, I think it was about 500 acres here with this house first up, and then not long after they bought another block across the road where they shifted over there to live because it was a better house at that time.
So we're talking 1920s, did you say?
1920, yep.
And what were they, sheep?
Would have been mixed farming, yeah, sheep. They had cattle. I remember going over there and they were milking. They used to have a milking cow or two. They were very self-supportive back when I was younger. Dad had a sister, that used to live on the farm and look after the parents, because Dad come here when he got married and come back from the war. When he got married, he came and lived on this house, in this house here. So my dad was born in this house and he lived here.
Physically born in this house?
Yep, literally born in this house. And lived most of his life in this house. He didn't die in this house, but he near enough did.
Really?
Till 94. Yep.
Wow.
So, yeah, so what happened here in 94 years when he was here, so...
Well, that's pretty nice now. Your son Luke and Holly are living in here, is that right?
It's magic, yep. Needed a family, big old house, needed a family, and they've put a lot of work into it and made it their own, so...
Trevor, can you tell me some of your earliest memories of growing up on the farm?
Yep. I can just still remember the 1967 drought, because we had to feed the sheep with the old Bedford truck back in those days. Instead of taking the old ute out feeding sheep, we used to feed out small bales on the back of the truck. And the hay shed always had to be filled every year. And if it wasn't full, you're always a bit worried that you wouldn't have enough stores for a year and a bit if it needed to be. So.
Did you ever run out of feed?
No, never. No, we used to always store oats as well if we could. So we used always a couple of years of oats on hand for sheep when we had sheep, and a couple of years of hay on hand if we had sheep. So
that's forward thinking for back then.
Well, there was dry times back then. The old timers, they used to feed their horses the roofs of their sheds, like they'll take all the straw off their shed and feed their horses. That was another haystack for them back in those days.
So the straw was in their roofs for insulation?
No, the straw was on there. Well, if you go around and find the old buildings around, They have straw roofs. Like that's how they made the sheds for horse stables and machinery sheds back then, were straw roofs with gums, like gum poles and or solid wood piles, and they used to just put sheaves of straw up there.
Now we've just your daughter-in-law just brought us some nice cake here. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah, thanks for the cup of tea. So, and then often Pop used to say the outside country used to come in and often want straw for just keeping their horses, because their horses were the main thing back in then, those days. They had to keep them alive, so. Whereas these days we just put a bit of diesel in and away we go. So, and you set them in the shed. You don't have to, other than make sure they've had an oil change and whatever that. But the horses was a 24/7 job. So
we're not talking Clydesdales though, are they?
Yeah,
we're talking Clydesdales here.
Yeah.
So they're pulling machinery.
They pulled all these old cultivators and that you would have seen here. My dad didn't use many horses in his day. He used a few in his earlier days when he was very young, but he said the tractors were starting to come in. He did a lot of work with, he filled a big creek in over here with a horse and dray and a horse bucket out of a creek, out of a dam.
Really?
Yeah.
I've seen those.
Yeah,
that must have taken some time.
It would, yeah. And you don't really work out how they had the time in those days, because by the time they got the horses organised in the morning, did their day's work, and then sorted the horses out and fed them and put them down at night, it was a full day's job, and up again and away they go again. So, yeah, and I still remember Dad talking about that one triangle paddock down there. It'd take him, I don't know how many hours to go around it with the tractor. He'd put a lantern on the crank handle at the front so he could see the groove to get around. Yeah, to see the groove from the last plough mark. And it used to take ages, so you wonder how they got. Well, we're lucky we can get over the amount of country we get over these days, and in those days, well, they just couldn't get over it. So,
were you shearing here too?
Yep. We had sheep. Yep, Dad had a stud for a long time. I think about early 90s, he gave the stud up. But Dad loved his sheep, so they always had sheep, and Dad used to shear a bit, and then all us, my older brother and myself and my middle brother, he didn't do it. He was the wise one, and he didn't learn to shear or crutch, so he didn't do any. But my older brother and myself used to do some. So.
Just for here, or did you go?
No, my brother, he had a round, and then when he got tired of that, he sort of handed that round over to me. So.
How was that in the body?
It was always a hard slog for the first few weeks getting back into it. Yeah, it's all right when you were younger and fairly fit. It was you didn't notice it as much, but as the years went on, you sort of, found it was harder every time to get back in it. And then the farm got busier as well, so got that way. We sort of didn't, you run out of time to do that.
So going to school, mate, did you like that?
Yep. Yeah, I didn't mind it. I suppose looking back on it, it was your best years of your life, really. But I enjoyed it. I made some good lifelong friends at school. It's the best friends still from school days. So
that's pretty special.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so it is very special, and I suppose that's country towns for you. You do go away. I went away, and a lot of people do go away. You don't catch up with them. You might not see them for 30 years or something. When you start going to funerals, you start catching up with a few coming back that you haven't seen for years. So.
Did you always want to come home on the farm?
I think it got into my blood, yes. I spent 7 years in Adelaide, down at Edinburgh there, and my dad always drummed into us that we need a trade if the farms, you've got something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And it sort of, it's always been handy in the workshop and doing stuff, and you see how the other half live as well. It was good, but you always closed in spaces. It takes a while to get used to, and you're always looking to get out on the weekend, and the opportunity came up to come home. So I didn't have to be asked twice. So I'm not sure if I got asked or I asked them.
And when did you meet your wife, Trevor?
About my late teens, at my brother's wedding. So there you go.
Really?
Yeah.
Love was in the air.
Yeah, was.
And was she interested in the farm too?
At that stage, she had a rural town sort of background. She came from Wilmington, and her dad was a fuel dealer up there, and then he was in the national parks. So yeah, she was sort of a country girl at heart, outside areas and that. So yeah, no, she's always been interested in farming. Once we come home, yeah, she's always been there for me, backed me 110%. So
Nice. And how many kids, mate?
3,
How many grandkids?
8.
Is Luke your favourite?
No, I don't have favourites.
So what changes did you make to the farm?
Well, just me, but my dad, he was always looking for something to improve things. Like he brought subclovers from Western Australia, and I remember as a kid being on the back of the old 18 or 20 row combine back in the day, watching the seed, because we'd only get little bags from across Western Australia, and we'd be planting it out, and somebody had to be on the back to make sure it didn't run out. And he had a best mate from the war. He's from the war was in Narrogin over in Western Australia, and he used to get some clover seeds from over there, because that's where sort of a lot of the clover seed started from.
And what's good about some of these subclovers?
Oh, well, they produce nitrogen. They fix nitrogen in the soil, so it was a cheap nitrogen source. So we got them going, and often in the early days it used to be a couple of years pasture, and then a couple of crops, and then a couple of years pasture, a couple of crops. So, and later on, like I just trying to get clover and medics over the whole country was sort of, you had to find the right varieties to suit your seasons and your soil type. So I had experimental plots here and there and everywhere, trying all different varieties I could get hold of a satchel here and there. And Luke probably curses a lot of the medics these days because of the lentils and legumes.
They're
are
still there. Are they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get much support with some of these trials?
No, not a lot. We did in the 80s had a really good ag department here. We had some good blokes in the ag department who, back in those days, they were our research teams and our backup service for a lot of things. If you had problems out in the paddock, you'd go to your local ag department and get them to come out and see what's going on. And back then it was, they were out in the paddocks looking at your problems and trying to solve them. And then they were sort of closely connected to the weight and research teams in Adelaide, which was really good because you got a lot of independent information, and it wasn't loaded information like today. You get somebody out to have a look at it, and if they're with some chemical company or whatever, it's always loaded information. So you got to be, I don't know, you got to be very careful where you source your information sometimes these days. So.
But you were doing a lot of your own research too, to I guess primarily look after your soil. And did you eventually want to use less chemicals?
Oh yeah, always. My brother did early spraying before I came home, and those early sprayers, they use 2,4-DB and T, and he's not here anymore. He's died of cancer, so you don't know if it's those early sprays because they had open tractors. They had.
Yeah.
And they had, they weren't any protection, no safety data on them, no protection anywhere. So it's a lot better these days, and the chemicals have you've got protocols you've got to use, and if they use properly, there's not a problem. So, and they're very useful. A lot of chemicals are useful and in the right place at the right time.
Going back a little bit though, I've heard stories of the crop duster coming over to spray a crop.
Oh yeah.
And the farmer would send their kid out there with a red flag and then move along 20 metres. Have you?
My wife and I have done that. But yeah. Yep. Standing in there, the old GPS was people in the paddock.
Yeah.
And you just had to make sure the wind was going the right direction.
Yeah. Sure.
And if it wasn't, well, you just
suck it in.
You dump down on the ground and cover yourself up and yeah. No, those days did happen. And
so you're heading in a great direction now with less chemicals. Can you tell me a bit about what you're up to?
Yeah, well, I reckon it started in the 90s. I got a dose of pickle on me on a respirator. I used a respirator, and we're pickling grain, and the respirator was one of these that when you let it go, the face went on this shirt. And anyway, I put it back on, and obviously the powder had got onto my shirt and then onto my face mask, and I put it on, didn't realise it. Thought I was doing the right thing, and then the next thing, I was playing table tennis that night, and I felt really crook. And I had a big red mark around my face where my mask had been, and the chemical had gone in through my face. So since that day, I don't think I haven't used a pickle on my grain ever since, and have never looked back. But I put other stuff on there, like it's not as though the grain's going into the soil without anything on it. So it gets all sorts of bits and pieces on it. So
Gee, that's a quick reaction from the pickle.
look, they have insecticides and all sorts of stuff on them. So yep, it would have been an insecticide, and they attack your nerve system. So since then, I've always been, and I was sick of spraying too. Like, you're always on the sprayer. So I've always been trying to minimise the things ever since then, and trying to find the goodies, identify the goodies out in the paddock. If you've got red leggers or whatever, see how many goodies are out there doing their job, or if they're not there, if they're not there and your plants are really suffering, well, you're going to have to do something. So you've got to use the sledgehammer. If you use a sledgehammer, you've got to then work out how that plant then can recover. What we're doing now is with Luke and Holly there, we've got means of softening that blow with your humates and your carbons and your other liquids, the molasses and whatever, which helps the plant to get over that initial shock, because every chemical you use on a plant, it does set a plant back. So no matter what it is, as grass herbicide or whatever it's registered to use on your crop, it doesn't matter what it is, the plant still has to process that chemical through its system and spit it out somehow. So if the plant's healthy and you help it and feed it some nutrition to help it, well, it helps it to do it quicker and recover quicker, and hopefully not even notice that it's had a chemical over it.
So what are you doing? You're putting a bit more of a natural fertiliser in the soil with the seed?
As well, yeah. We're trying to get our community built in our soil, because we've killed it. We've been killing it for many years. So we killed it with this. Old timers, they didn't realise it, but they were killing it with shears. The digging shears, like ripping up the earth,
Right.
doing fallow and all that sort of stuff. Every time, what's under the soil is a total community. You got food webs, fungi, and a live city under the soil, which they can try to send probes to the moon, but they still can't. They don't know how many organisms and bugs that are under the soil. They haven't even identified them all. Have no idea, because there's that many of them. This is how far we are behind with growing our food. So in that sense, when you got moisture when it's dry, it's a different story. Nothing really happens under there. But when it's wet, it's a living city under the soil. And every time you go through it with a tine or something, you're destroying. It's like an earthquake through a city, or a flood through a city. And so then they got to rebuild. And so every time they got to rebuild, you're setting yourself back that far. It could take a season to rebuild all those webs that hold your soil together, and all those fungi, and we've been killing them with insecticides as well, and fungi and fungicides, herbicides. Some herbicides are better than others that don't do so much damage, and like I said, if you buffer them, it doesn't hurt them so much, because then the bugs can actually eat them and process them. It's like urea. If you coat it with some bugs, they'll eat the urea and store the urea for you instead of using a bloody inhibitor. I don't know, they're trying to sell you inhibitors these days to stop your urea from dissolving too quick out in the paddock if you don't get enough rain. Well, just coat it with some damn bugs, and the bugs will eat the urea for it, and they'll store it, and when they die, you got natural urea. So I don't know, this is what I mean. Companies are trying to just sell you stuff all the time, and we don't. If we go back to nature has done it for millions of years, and we've only got to learn, and that's been lost. We've lost that over time. So, and that's what I've had trouble finding, is somebody that's on the same page to teach you about this stuff. There's people out there, but they're far and few between, and to find the same like-minded people has been very hard. It's getting easier now because more people are putting their hands up, but a lot of people probably thought, everyone looks at you sideways if you're doing something different back in the day. And
So when you go out in the paddock and you want to have a look at the soil and you dig up a plant, what do you look for around the root system?
Oh, well, you're looking for the roots, the root hairs, and just life.
Yeah.
You know,
And it can be a little bit
worms.
sticky sometimes too around the roots.
Oh,
Is that a
look.
good thing?
Look, yeah, when you dig a root system up, if you've got the nice moisture and things happening there, you want to see worms hanging out, and you want it to come up like a pine tree, upside down. You know, the pine tree's up there. You know, the root system, when you turn it up, it looks like a pine tree, and you give it a shake, and it still looks like a pine tree.
Yeah.
Because you've got that many hairs and it's things happening there on your root systems that they're not naked.
Yeah.
And you know things are happening. And you see a few worms pop out here and there, you're laughing. So you know they're in a happy place, and your roots are in a happy place. And that's where your carbon's going to be built too. Like if you've got naked roots and not many roots there, that's your story of where your carbon's going to come from. Because roots build carbon in your soil, and carbon stores moisture. So, and there's your drought proofing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a no-brainer. And here we are trying to destroy it with, urea, we need it, nitrogen we need, like, no doubt about it, we need it, but there's natural forms, like you use your legumes to get your natural form, which we have been trying to do for years, but in saying that, you still need to try to control it, because when we were back into, I was year in, year out, year in clover and year wheat, and I ended up with a lot of screenings, because you just couldn't control, depending on the season you had, if you had tight finish, you just can't control the amount of nitrogen you got underneath.
Yeah.
Because you can get a lot of nitrogen there. Like, so I never used to apply much nitrogen at all.
Right.
For many years. It's only when you start putting on a barley crop, or you put a few more crops in a row, but then you have trouble with your clovers regenerating have enough seed there, because your sheep like the seed as well. They'll scratch for the subclover, because the subclover buries itself, seed. So they end up scratching that, but the secret is the numbers game, as always is with the numbers game, is to get your pastures going. So it's always a catch-22. And in saying that, with sheep and cropping, it's always you robbing Peter to pay Paul most of the time, because you want sheep feed, but you should be spraying it out, because you know those weeds are causing it could be a disease problem for the future, or they're sucking moisture out. And so when your system we've got now, it allows you to do things properly. Like you know that you're not saving feed for the sheep. You can go and whack it when you want to.
Yeah. So just to recap then, no sheep at all on the property now?
No. My wife and I were the sheep people, and we decided we wanted to go travelling, and Luke showed, he did a case study on us on how much time labour was worth, and we both could have been checkout chicks and made more money. So so that was our opener, actually. But in saying that, a lot of that time I love doing. I love my sheep. Like I had a pet lamb once that, and we used to have a lot of pet lambs. I could show you a photo. The kids had about 12 pet lambs one year, and they all had their faces through this wire gate, and it was quite hilarious. But I had a pet lamb that when I had it down here, and he used to come in the workshop with me all the time, and end up I put safety glasses and earmuffs on it, because if I was angle grinding, it'd be there. It'd be just there. Yeah, and it was quite happy. But yeah, no, I love them. I probably miss them, but in saying that, I always tearing my hair out in trying to get things bounced between the, and that's why we probably went for the more labour-intensive scenario of locking our sheep up early in the year after the stubbles they'd been through the stubbles, and the stubbles were starting to break down. We used to lock them up, and then we'd mate in the feedlot and bring them out in the spring and plant our feed, and hopefully have our feed up 6 inches, 8 inches high before we let them out of the feedlot to lamb down in the early spring. So
Right.
and that's how we used to do it. But it made it labour intensive during winter. But in saying that, it used to save the paddocks.
Yeah.
Got them off the paddocks when you didn't want them there, and then you could. And when they were pregnant, we could actually save a lot of feed too. Like we used to test all our feed, so we knew what we were giving them, and we had a mixer so we could weigh stuff. And one dry year there, we had a limited amount of feed on hand because I reckon it was the second year in a row. And luckily we tested everything, because actually the hay we had was good enough to keep early pregnant ewes going just on hay without feeding me any grain.
Really?
Yeah. So we saved heaps
Yeah.
on
There was
feeding.
enough nutrition in the hay for them.
Yep, there was, until they got to a certain stage in pregnancy, and then we added a little bit more grain. But in that as well, we could control their weight, that they didn't get too fat as well, because we preg tested and had twins and singles, so we fed them accordingly. I had help from a local lady who's pretty good with that sort of stuff, and she had a program sorted out that that the ewes needed so much protein and feed to a certain term, and then so we could feed that, and with weight and knowing what everything was worth, what quality that was, it was easy. And the sheep would come out there at the right weight, like you'd keep them at the weight you wanted them, and they wouldn't be over fat, so you'd have trouble lambing and all that sort of stuff. So that was good, but it was time consuming.
Yeah.
And it's allowed us to run more ewes, like we were running 1,200 ewes at the time. Wouldn't have even been a third of the country of our land we had. So
That's a big change for you now to be cropping only and no sheep.
oh yeah, it is. It is. My dad loved his sheep, and I suppose that rubbed off on me. But when I was shearing them, I probably didn't love them as much as once I gave up shearing.
I was chatting to Luke the other day too, and he said he didn't love them as much as his grandfather either.
No, he doesn't. He's. I suppose it's like everything. You learn how to handle them, and it's like most things. If you're in a hurry, the sheep never work. It never works. Like you can't be in a hurry when you're dealing with animals. And
Now I'm loving this clever theory you've got with your crops. You're looking after the soil. You're coming into sowing period. The soil's already a lot healthier. You've got a longer stalk there. It's been shaded all through summer. Is that right?
Yep.
Can you tell me about that after you've had your cake?
Yeah, it's something Luke and Holly have really ran with, which is really good. It gives you soil cover. Like in the old days, they used to fallow to store moisture, and they used to because it stopped that capillary reaction.
When you say fallow, how did that work?
Well, meant out in springtime, well, they'd probably be doing it earlier than now, because they didn't have a lot of chemicals either. They would dig up a paddock and kill all the spring growth on it, and leave it and let that die, and try to kill it. So that grass or pasture that was there would die, so it wouldn't use any more moisture, and then they'd harvest any summer rainfall through there. It would probably let some out, but because they dug down, 3 or 4 inches, it would stop that capillary reaction. That top will dry out like it had been bone dry, but it stops that capillary reaction, which we have now with a disc system. Our capillary reaction goes right to the top of the surface now, to like this table.
Yep.
So that's why now, if you're not disturbing the topsoil as much, you're not getting what the old timers used to get, was that insulation of soil, disturbed soil, totally right across the paddock. Which act as an insulator.
And they'd be killing a lot of that fungi and burning that life off.
Yeah. No, they were achieving something different, and that's the tools they had at hand.
Yeah.
But now we're sort of trying to stop that capillary reaction through summer with the straw. So the straw is shading the ground and keeping the temperature on the soil surface at a lower temperature, and therefore protecting it and not allowing that evaporation as much. So,
Well, I love the theory. Looking at your farming career, what's been the biggest change that you've seen?
Look, I remember coming home, and because the seeding equipment we had back then were like buck rakes, like you could not have too much grass or straw, and if you didn't have enough straw or grass on the paddock to burn it, you got harrows, like called fire harrows out, and you drove around burning every stick of blade of grass or straw that you could, and that was a no-brainer. That went many years ago, and so we haven't burnt off in, don't know, at least 35 years now. It would be I reckon easy.
So did farming help shape rural communities in those early days?
Oh, well, they were the rural communities. Communities are faded because the people are not in the area anymore, because you don't need as many to get over the acres. Like, you don't need the people. You got big machinery, you got tractors, headers, whatever. You still need bums on seats, but not like they did years and years ago. It was a numbers game, and every property would have had a workman, or some properties, if they were bigger properties, would have 2 or 3. So that's been lost, and now the bigger farmers are getting bigger, and so there's more families disappearing all the time, and which is hard on rural communities. Doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
We're lucky here at Jamestown because we've got a lot of amenities that when you're getting older you need. Hospitals and doctors and dentists and therapy pools and you name it. We have it, but a lot of towns haven't got the population to keep that. And if you have got that, it seems to help your town grow.
Yeah.
Because people will come to retire. So you end up with an older demographic of community, but you still have the young ones here still, but usually they've got to go away, get jobs or study or whatever.
What advice have you got for today's young farmers?
Look, I think they just got to realise their soil is their asset and their future. If they don't look after it and kill it with chemicals, we've got to change the way we're looking at it. We've been driven by big companies' profit. I'm using an old quote that I've heard several times now. The farmer's been farmed, and it's time that the farmers sort of started saying, well, look, we can do this better in using more natural products. Not organic. It's not organic. You've got your foot in both worlds. It's what I call smart farming, because you're using the best that is information that is available to improve your soil, improve your water holding capacity, and in doing that, you're also improving the availability of your minerals that your crop needs in the soil as well. We've got that much phosphorus locked up out there that we could probably farm nearly internally. They reckon, I have heard of blokes saying that they're not even applying phosphorus now and their phosphorus levels are going up.
Really?
I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And I do know worms ship calcium, so there you go. That's why the more worms you got, the less calcium you've got to spread. So
Yeah.
and there's bugs and things out there that have been doing it for thousands of years. You just got to not kill them and try to feed them and make them work for you, and try to get things back in harmony. That we're not. I think I suppose we've lost that art, and now we've got the machinery and stuff. And times change, and we're in a privileged position now. We have the machinery that will allow us to do a lot of this stuff. Where back in the day, they didn't. They had to kill weeds somehow. They had to do things. Fire and cultivation was probably the 2 main tools they ever had. Whereas today, we're really blessed with the amount of machinery choices and chemical choices that you can use wisely. It's not to say you don't use chemicals. Like I said, you got a problem, you can't go broke doing this. If you go broke doing this, there's no use doing it. So, and you got to enjoy doing it. I think it puts you more in touch with your land by doing this. Like your footprint's got to be out in that paddock more often. And I think that's good. I love being out in the paddock. I just about to tell you every line of soil type on this property because, I've been over it that many times. And I think everyone should do that. If you're sitting home and your agronomist goes out in your paddock and you get a note at the end of the day, that's what you spray out. Well, I can't put up that. I have arguments with my agronomist because I often say, well, do I need that? Do I need that? And I have been known to patch out paddocks because I know where the patches are. And sometimes my son have told me he's not doing it anymore. He said, you see that patch over those weeds? Well, that's where you left it last time. But I said, there's not that many there though. But he said, there's some there. Means I've got to go out this year and spray them. So, so we don't do as much as that. But I used to do a lot of that, just patch out paddock. And that was saving on chemical and I didn't want all the chemicals over the whole paddock. So
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
All right, Trevor, we've got some off-the-wall questions here. This is the fun part.
All right.
And these can just be short answers, and you don't have to answer them all. What do people misunderstand about you most?
Yes. That I'm a procrastinator. I'm not. I'm a deep thinker.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, you get it right, I reckon, too.
Yeah, I'm a deep thinker. No, they say I procrastinate too long.
All right, what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from your experience?
Biggest failure? With beans and lentils, I've been there, done that. I was growing lentils before the 2000s. I actually gave up in 2000 and in the 2000 because everyone started growing them and started getting diseases. I thought, bugger that. I didn't want to spray them. I didn't have to spray them before other than grass feed them.
But you realised you needed the legume then, or the
Oh,
nourishing?
we've always had legumes. That's the subclover, the medics.
Right.
Always had legumes. Have been part and parcel. But Dad knew we need legumes. So the old ryegrass, the seed boxes on the back were where the old rice grass was used for feed for sheep stock, because they planted that for stock feed.
Yeah.
And then now we're trying to kill it because it's a weed. But in its own right, it is a very good plant. It is a very good plant. And so then we use those boxes then to plant clovers because we needed nitrogen and didn't want to have to use it out of the bag all the time. So, and phosphorus made a big difference to our country. Like superphosphate made a big difference to all farming country. But it's like everything, you've got to keep your soil in balance. And Albricks is a very intelligent man, and he's the pH, like the power of hydrogen, is very important. And I think that's, if every farmer could do a course on that and read their soil tests and know what they're looking at and what their farm needs, our cropping and our food would be a lot better. Like I'd say our health problem is our food.
Yeah.
It is. It's our food, and our food's crap. I can tell you. Because what are we growing? We're growing quantity. We're not growing quality. We're growing quantity because that's what we're getting paid on.
Yeah.
We're not getting paid on quality.
Yeah.
There you go. And you can't go broke doing what you're doing. So you got to keep chasing it. But we're trying to get a bit of both happening, and hopefully somebody will pay us for quality.
Yeah.
In the future. And in saying that, we know our plants are stronger, and we get less insects, and we get less fungus and other problems if our plants are healthy than if we feed them with nitrogen, bagged nitrogen or whatever. So,
After a tough autumn and winter, you're shining bright out here.
we're lucky in as well. Like I say things are, our system is showing that it's working, but we're lucky we're a bit later district, and that's helped us. Like if we were a month earlier, I don't know, it could be different story, but it's showing it's working. So I know Luke and I did comment only a couple of years ago when we were having some good years, and I said, "Oh, are we doing the right thing? You know, are things working?" You know, we couldn't see. All right, we're still reaping pretty good crops, similar to everybody in the district. Hadn't gone backwards, and we weren't throwing as much fert and fungicides around. And I said, well, I think, you know, we are getting there, because we were only putting, we reluctantly put a fungicide out in 2022, and some neighbours had put out 3 already. And so I said to Luke, I think things are starting to work. And because those red flats down there that we're looking at over here, in 1940 flood, they were scarred badly. And I, as a kid, remember bare patches out, nothing growing.
Right.
And Pop couldn't even get a cultivator in them unless it was really wet. The water wouldn't go in.
Yeah.
And one thing my dad did say to me, he said, "This country has so improved."
Yeah.
When he in his older, he drive around and he said, "Oh, gee, this country has improved."
It's rehydrated.
Oh, it's just looking healthy. Like there's no bare patches in any paddock. I remember bare patches that's like a scald area, and nothing would grow all year.
Are the sheep a bit to blame for that? A little bit?
No, that was the flood. It just took all the tops because they had fallow and all the soil was loose. So when the floods come off the hills up here, it just went through and took the soil with it.
So going back to the biggest failure, I think giving up beans for a couple of years, was that it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I grew beans and lentils for a long time, and there's times that I kept telling Luke that I never rep them. Like I plant them and never reap them, because they didn't come to think they die. But in saying that, our techniques have changed. Like they weren't the first thing that went in back in those days, because they weren't a priority, whatnot, and they got better varieties. So, you know, our farming systems and our knowledge has changed. So, you know, Luke backs them in early, gets them in, and you give them the whole season to have a fair crack. And they got good cover and they got protection. So, and back in those days, there wasn't a lot of cover. Like, we'd never had the stubble cover around like we have now.
Yeah.
And that's making big differences.
All right, Trevor, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
One thing. Oh, gee whiz, that's drawing a long bow, isn't it?
Healthy soils?
They're not there yet. No, look, shit, we've got a long way to go. Long way to go. Like, I want to see 4 and 5% carbon in my soils, and then I know I've got a good. Luke's got. He's taken on, and Holly are doing a damn good job, and they're really going forward, gangbusters. But we only just started. Like, there's a big way to go. Like, and I think because they're talking about drier times in the future, well, yeah, our soil's going to be our sponge, and it's not just. It's carbon, it's fungi, it's all that living organisms in the soil, and getting your stalks on your grains, on your wheat and your barley, see if we can get a solid stem.
Yeah.
So you've got more moisture in there to protect yourself against frost and these dry times. So there's a lot out there. We're only scratching the surface. Like, I wish I was 20 years younger. I get excited about this now. And there's so much to read, podcasts you can listen to, like. So much information out there, and now that it's starting to get momentum, there's people popping up everywhere. But back in the day, you try to find somebody and think the same way, or to help yourself along. They weren't, they were far and few between.
Well, there'll be a good podcast coming up soon. Want to edit this one for them to listen to?
No, there's a lot more people out there. You get the John Kemps and the Joel Williamses and. Look, there's a lot of more educated people out there than myself and Chris Jones, and you just start listening. Like, there's a page of them out there. There's so much information. And Tim Parton from England, he was self-taught, and he was a very interesting man.
What's one thing you wish you could teach your crops if they could actually listen to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more about teaching us as farmers, really, because the soil's there. We need to listen to what the soil and the country's telling us. Like, we got to get back to the basics. Like, and you can tell if your soil's sick. You see different colours of soil. You beat it around too much. You worked it too much, or whatever. There's information out there all the time that tells. The soil will tell you. We've just got to learn to look and listen and be more vigilant in what we're seeing, because the plants will tell you what even their leaves and that will tell you, I'm hungry, I need something, and which, so Luke and Holly are now doing sap tests and other things which, they're not the be all and end all, but you've got to have somewhere, some guidance of somehow to sort of get a feedback on what the plant needs or whatever. So I think we just got to be more in tune with our land.
Well said, mate. If you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
I'd probably go and study soil science now, but in saying that, you've got to find the right university that's going to do the out-of-the-box stuff, and that's the trouble. A lot of them don't do that out-of-the-box stuff. And
I think you are, mate. You've been doing it for 60-something years.
Yeah, but you couldn't go, like, you take the Chris Jones, she got kicked out because she was off the tangent because they weren't towing the university line, because she was out here looking at organisms and stuff, and
she's fascinating.
And that's what I'm saying. You have a look at the people that are kicked out of the departments that they weren't towing the line, and they're the ones that are doing this stuff. And been doing it for years. But you've got to get it back to, I suppose, you get some of these people, they go into too deep. They lose us farmers sometimes in the technical points that we just don't need. We just need that what works, and there's snake oils out there, no doubt it. But this is where they should be doing research. What works, what doesn't. Oh, you farmers can save money by saying, well, this is snake oil, guys, but this stuff is really actually doing something here somehow. But I throw more nitrogen at it, chuck more urea at it, chuck more shit at it.
Yeah.
And so they're not sort of helping us, they're sending us a path. Well, it's a path that you're going to hit a brick wall one day.
Yeah. Is there one or two influential people in your life that springs to mind?
Well, Greg Barr from down from Pinery, he was probably the first bloke that I really, he turned up I'm not sure how he turned up on our place, but he came and he said, he got a shovel out of the back of his vehicle and he said, let's go and have a look out in the paddock. And I thought, shit, this bloke's got a shovel. He's worth listening to, because not many people will come out and take the time to get a shovel and dig some soil and see what's happening underground.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
This ground is where stuff grows. You know, we don't want hydroponics. You can go bloody hydroponics in your back garage. We want our soil to live and get all that nutrition out of our soil, not hydroponics. So when he turned up with a shovel, I thought, well, and he's been very good.
Yeah.
We're still with him, and there's been a big learning curve, and I think he's learning as he's going as well. And we've got some good people now behind us and with us that we're all learning. And something. Well, we've got a chemist that's doing our brews for us. Well, shit, he's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
But this podcast, like John Kempf, he's a known person that hit a brick wall with his chemical career with his dad and had a light bulb moment and hasn't turned back. And love to get him over here to Australia and pick his brain. Like, he's a fairly religious man, but saying that, he shares his information, and that's only getting bigger and bigger in America, which every climate's different, but basically the soil is the prime producer of what you're trying to grow. Like, she's where it all starts. So.
Yeah. What time of the day do you get your best work done, Trevor?
If I get out of bed early enough, probably in the morning.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, if you could have a coffee or a cold beer with anyone, who would it be?
I reckon it'd have to be John Kemp.
Nice.
Yeah.
And if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Oh, JT's pretty good. It's better the one you know than the one you don't, I reckon. So
JT, Jamestown.
Jamestown, yeah. They always say you always look to come home, don't you? Somewhere, if you're going away, you always look to come home, and the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And I think, you know, if you get to know, and the people, like you got, you know, a great town here, good community, and everyone pitches in and has a go and helps, and that's what country life's about. So.
Well, you mentioned smart farming before, Trevor, and you're doing it bloody well, mate. So congratulations of what you are up to, yourself, Luke and Holly. It's been exciting talking to you, and I've learnt stacks, so thanks so much for your time, mate.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a learning curve, and I'm so proud of these other two over here for taking it on.
Well done, mate. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for listening.
And I'd love it if you could follow us on Facebook. Search Salt of the Earth Farm Stories.
Salt of the Earth Farm Stories is proudly brought to you by Grig Media.